Left of Lansing podcast. If you truly want to get Pat fired up, talk about Tigers baseball or how you think the 90s produced the worst music of any decade, you've been warned. Email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com and follow him on Twitter at leftoflansing. Here's Pat.
Well, we've brought up Republican State Representative Matt Maddock perhaps a few times here on the podcast of late, and his name may have popped up, here and there, and maybe his wife's too. He's pure MAGA, and his extreme disregard for our democratic institutions, his disdain for the majority of the people that he's supposed to represent, and his bigotry must be defeated at the polls this year. Not only that, but if he's gone, not only is that a huge loss for the MAGA movement, I think, but it's also a major victory for District 51 and for the state of Michigan, since that'll mean that Democrats will probably increase their majority in the state house. Sarah May-Seward is coming back to have a rematch against Matt Maddock this fall, and she's my guest here on this week's Left of Lansing. Sarah, I've been looking forward to talking with you for quite some time, so thanks for being on this week. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I've been definitely looking forward to this.
Well, first, let's talk about District 51. I believe it's entirely in Oakland County, running from west to east, from Milford to Commerce Township, and then north to Highland Township on the west side, and White Lake Township to the northeast side. Am I close there?
Yep. It also includes Davisburg.
Okay. All right. And Davisburg as well. Don't want to forget that. How long have you lived in the area?
My entire life. I grew up in Highland, and then in 6th grade moved to Milford. When I was about 32, I moved to White Lake.
So what do you like most about your district? And, why do you want to fight for the people from your district? And why do you want to represent them in Lansing?
Our community deserves actual representation. I mean, for 6 years, we've had, and even before that, we've had basically absentee representation. Our seat in the House has been left vacant or ignored. And so I'm running because I believe that our district deserves nice things. We deserve to have a say in what goes on in Lansing and in Oakland County. We're often ignored even in Oakland County. That's why I'm on multiple boards for Oakland County. Anytime a seat comes up, I'm like, well, there's nobody on that board that represents anywhere in North or West Oakland. So I typically join them. And now I'm on 7.
So when you say maybe your area tends to get ignored a little bit than other parts of Oakland County, what parts of Oakland County are you talking about? Like Royal Oak
Royal Oak, Ferndale, West Bloomfield. Okay. There's a lot of focus on Pontiac, which is good because now it's shifting more towards us, and Pontiac is technically the heart of Oakland County. But yeah, I mean, even mental health care services are often overlooked when we're allocating different resources out into the county, like crisis services, SUD care, all of that. We are often just overlooked.
And you said that you've been on multiple boards there for Oakland County. What kinds of boards are we talking about here, Sarah?
So I'm currently on the executive board for the Oakland Community Health Network. So that handles mental health care and care for people with cognitive and behavioral and also physical disabilities within Oakland County. I'm also on the SUD, Substance Abuse Disorder Committee, through the OCHN board, and that handles a lot of getting resources for testing strips and Narcan out into the different communities. I'm the vice chair of the Sanitary Appeals Board for Oakland County. That handles a lot of septic issues when you're replacing your septic and say the health department denies that. You eventually will come to our board and we get to work with you and hopefully make it so that you can replace your septic, but also so that our waters are protected. I'm the chair of the Food Service Appeals Board in Oakland County. And when I was placed on this board, I'm the only person who works in the food industry on the board. I am on the Oakland Neighborhood and Housing Development Board. I'm on the Citizen Advisory Committee for that. We worked with HUD to ensure that language included caregivers for people with disabilities, because a lot of times HUD housing only thinks of the person with disabilities, but we're forgetting that they often have caregivers, so that housing is not just senior housing that's accessible, but also just housing for families that might have a person with disability in it. I'm also on the Children's Issues Board for the state. And I think that's all the boards right now.
That's it? Really? Yeah, it doesn't sound like you really do much here, Sarah. Come on now. You got to pick it up
No,
a
not
bit.
at all. They're not paid positions. We get mileage. I think last week I got a check for about $14. So this is strictly because I firmly believe that our area deserves to have a voice and a say in our county and when big decisions are being made and funds are being allocated.
Forgive me because you went through a bunch of boards there, but a couple that I wrote down, mental health care, disabilities, why were those some areas that you really wanted to focus on?
My daughter is 20 years old now, but she has quite a few diagnoses. She has schizencephaly, hydrocephalus, cerebral palsy. She is on this autism spectrum. And for the first 8 years of her life, I was a single parent with no help. And in trying to work with all of these different, the assistance that's out there and the different programs that are out there, it felt like I was just always in this circle of trying to get the help I needed, but not really getting it from the places that everybody tells you to go to when you need it. That's housing, accessible housing. That's her medical equipment and a bed for her because she can't just lay flat on a bed. And back when she was 8 years old, you couldn't go on Amazon and just order an adjustable bed. Out of frustration, I was like, who makes these decisions? Who decides that these providers get millions of dollars from our county and yet they're not providing the help that people like me and my daughter need? So I just ended up researching and finding out who it was, and I got on the boards.
Is that what got you to decide that you would like to get into the game and that you wanted to run for a state house seat? I think you first ran in 2022. All these experiences and meeting all of these different people and having all of these different discussions and dealing with all these different experiences that you got to experience, is that what helped make your decision that, hey, I'd like to get in there and represent these people, represent people who really don't have a voice and speak up for them?
That's one of the reasons. Some of the boards were actually after I ran the first time. I mean, I've been trying to get on the Oakland Community Health Network board for like 7 years now. Every time there's a vacancy, I applied. Yeah, it's that people like me and my family deserve a voice. And because the way that my brain reacts to frustration and being worn down is to keep fighting. I figured I could fight for people who they don't have the bandwidth. It's really hard. It's really exhausting. And you feel very ignored and just down about it. That's on top of trying to take care of your loved one who has disabilities and all of the work that takes, and trying to work to support them too.
You said the term here, absentee representation, and I think that's how you're describing Matt Maddock and his so-called work that he's doing in Lansing for your district. Is that what made you then want to come back here in 24? Because you lost to him 2 years ago. You did pretty well, though. I think you garnered around, 44% of the vote. Is that why you wanted to come back here and give it another try? Because you feel so passionate about the people that you like to serve and especially the issues that you focus on?
Absolutely. This is my community. I mean, I've lived here my entire life. I graduated from Milford High. My daughter graduated from Milford High. We made sure that when we moved to White Lake, we were still in the boundaries of Huron Valley School District because this is our community. These people raised me. So I'm never going to stop fighting for them. And it has nothing to do with party. If we had an okay Republican that was in the seat, I probably wouldn't be so fired up to keep running. But every time that somebody has run against Matt Maddock, they've moved the needle, but they've never ran again. And then you lose that name recognition.
Right.
And you lose all the work that was already done by the previous candidate. So I just don't give up very easily.
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I decided to start this podcast, because I wanted to highlight people like you, Sarah, who just keep doing the work and who refuse to give up, and to let everybody around the state know that there are people like you. And I think if everybody gets to know everybody and understands what's happening around the state, that will help galvanize all of us to defeat people like Matt Maddock at the polls and replace them with people who have so much invested in their community, people like you, Sarah. I saw in the Hometown Life newspaper earlier this month, I think, that you listed some other priorities that are high on your list in this campaign. And one of them is something that I've been keeping my eye on, and that's polluter pay. I've had Sean McBrady of Clean Water Action Michigan on the show to talk about that very issue of polluter pay, which they are really focused on passing. And what they want to do, and what everybody who supports polluter pay wants, is to make corporations have some skin in the game for the waste that they leave behind in our communities. And I also saw that you would like to give extra protections or work on giving extra protections for OSHA workers. Sarah, what is it about these two particular issues that you really want to highlight during your campaign? Why are these some main focal points this time around?
So for polluter pay, it hits pretty close to home. Our major river here in my district, the Huron River, it has been polluted by the same company 3 times. And this is the river that I grew up canoeing on. Our 6th grade trip in middle school was walking down to the river and hopping in a canoe. You can no longer trust that water because Tri-Bar has dumped PFAS in it twice, and they dumped hexavalent chromium in it. And that's the Aaron Brockovich chemical. And yet they don't have to pay for the cleanup. They don't have to pay for the testing and the monitoring of it. And our area is filled with fishers, hunters, and you can't eat the fish from the river now. And I'm still worried about the fact that a lot of our wildlife drink from the river or from parts that come off of the river. How can we trust that the deer that we hunt are edible? So it's extremely frustrating that the taxpayers have had to pay for the cleanup and the monitoring of the rivers. And I believe that polluters should pay. I mean, Tri-Bar is still worth millions of dollars. They haven't taken a hit at all.
Which is why I guess I always viewed this as like a double taxation on the people. In order to get these companies to move into a certain community, the community has to agree to give a certain amount of tax breaks or tax incentives, which we are paying for. And then when they leave, we have to then pay for the mess that they leave behind.
Well, and it's like 3 times the incentive for them to just keep dumping, because they also get to use our water treatment plants to dump their water into. And that puts a burden on those water treatment plants also. And then it puts the onus on the people in that community and their water treatment plant instead of the polluter.
All right. And then maybe then explain how you would like to help strengthen OSHA or some protection for OSHA.
It's beyond OSHA. It's outside of OSHA that I'm interested in. So in the service industry, I'm a bartender. In the service industry, I mean, we've all seen videos of people attacking McDonald's workers and getting violent. We've seen people attacking customer service, people in retail, and I personally have gotten multiple concussions bartending because I've been attacked for doing my job. I was once punched in the head for asking somebody for their ID. And then another time I cut a couple women off because they were very drunk, and just nicely, hey, I'll give you a free Red Bull, you don't have to leave yet, it's 1:30, might as well just stay for the extra half an hour and chill so that you can get home safely. And they left, and when I walked out to my car, they jumped me. So we need additional protections and kind of like enhanced sentencing. If you assault somebody, yes, you can be charged. But if you assault somebody who's on the job, that puts a lot of stress on that worker. I can't do anything because I could lose my job. And my job, it pays the bills. So I'm under that stress. And then there's the worry about pressing charges, because then what will people say about the establishment? I believe that there should be more enhanced sentencing for people who attack people who are on the job. I mean, road workers get that protection, right?
Right. Well, since we're on this topic, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you, being a bartender and working in the service industry for a number of years, especially right after the pandemic and things have opened back up, have customers, Sarah, been more generous or not? Or is it somewhere in between? What would you say?
There was a time where they were a lot more generous and kind and grateful that we were there. There weren't a lot of issues. I think that the political environment might be ramping people up, because now this past year has probably been the hardest year for me in the service industry. I've been in the service industry in one way or another since I was about 12, and I'm 42 now. And this has probably been the hardest year for me in terms of the way people treat service workers, the tipping culture, I've got lots to say about tipping, but this is the world we live in. And so you should tip people accordingly. We make $3.47 an hour.
Absolutely. And I just have to tell you, Sarah, when I was 18, I worked as a host at a chain restaurant for just 2 weeks because dealing with hungry people, that's difficult. I never, though, had to deal with hungry and drunk people at the same time. And I don't know how some of you guys are able to do that, because sometimes when I go to a bar and I see how the workers are sometimes berated by certain customers, that makes me so sad for the worker. And I know I couldn't do it. In fact, I couldn't do it because at 18, I left that restaurant job and I just went and cut lawns for the local school district, because at least there I didn't have to deal with people. So I get exactly what you're saying. And moving on here, if you don't mind, I read a New Republic story from 2020 right in the middle of the pandemic where you were featured in that story.
Right.
And you were calling for an end to tipped wages. And it highlighted how you were once part of the one fair wage movement. Was wondering if you could talk about that and if you're still part of that movement.
So the one fair wage movement, the reason I was a part of that is because I was once again struggling, panicking during the pandemic. You know, they kept shutting us down, opening us up, letting us stay open for just like 4 hours a day with less capacity. And it was a huge struggle. And because of tipped wages, we were not eligible for unemployment because you have to make a certain amount to get unemployment. And I was $174 short and could not get unemployment. And so sitting there, panicking, laying on the couch, crying, calling unemployment, I'm like, how do I get answers to this? Who makes this decision? So we started contacting Gary Peters, trying to make sure that any funds additional to unemployment were also for people who make a tipped wage, who make sub-minimum wage. You know, I called unemployment to get answers, mostly just like asking questions. Well, why is it like this? Why is the system not working right? And I was able to figure out the best way to apply. And I actually made a lot of contacts in doing that within unemployment and the governor's office. And I was on a town hall with AOC. And I decided to use all of those contacts and the information that I had to get myself unemployment. I started helping other people get unemployment. I would do Zoom calls and walk them through the process. I would sit with them and we'd both dial over and over again to get through. And then I'd pass the phone to them. I would travel to their house and just let them use my Wi-Fi hotspot, because a lot of people at that point couldn't even afford internet because it was one of the things they had to cut because we went months without anything. So it was just another thing that I was really frustrated about and didn't give up. But that's how I got involved in One Fair Wage, was that they reached out to me to be the unemployment lead for the state of Michigan. And so I just like took calls all day long, helping people get it.
So that's how you got involved in fighting for like freelance part-time and sub-minimum wage workers?
Yes, exactly. Yep. One Fair Wage is about giving tipped employees the actual minimum wage plus with tips on top. So that way we still can qualify for things like unemployment and Social Security.
Were you disappointed when you saw that the state Supreme Court ruled that the $15 minimum wage proposal would not be on the ballot this year?
Absolutely. I mean, so there's, good things and bad things about ending the tipped minimum wage, but it was definitely frustrating. How many years have we gotten the signatures and gotten it on the ballot, and in lame duck, it's been pulled back and reworked? It's over and over again. So while the minimum wage in the state of Michigan goes up, we're still just getting raises of like a quarter every 4 years.
I think I saw where you said being a tipped worker, yeah, maybe some nights you're going to do really well, but then there are going to be those other nights that you don't do as well, and you're kind of on the whims of the customer, and that's hard to live day to day. I mean, because if they are on a salary base, they know exactly what's coming in, but not so much for a tipped worker.
Yeah, it's really difficult to budget.
So all these things we've been talking about here, polluter pay, one fair wage, more protections for workers. I'm assuming these are all things that are not really that high in the priority list for one Matt Maddock, right?
Oh, absolutely not. When the hexavalent chromium spill happened, the canoe place that I was talking about, Havner Canoes, they held a press thing that they did where they invited everybody. And I might be wrong, but I believe that the family that owns Havner is pretty Republican. Only Democrats showed up. Our own state rep did not show up to that protest to speak on these polluters just demolishing our river, like wrecking property value of the people who live on that river and the people who make their money off of services based around the river. And he didn't put out any information. He didn't make a comment on it. And then as far as wages, I mean, why would he care? He's
Right.
getting taxpayer money to do nothing. So why would he care?
Right. Well, that just seems apropos for Matt Maddock. I mean, why would he care about a fair wage for everybody in his district? Why would he care about the environmental concerns about those in his district? It seems like he's really only there to enrich himself and maybe those that he deems important, his donors. Sarah, I've been meaning to ask you this one because Maddock also voted against the child marriage ban last year. And while voting against it, I think that he used some anti-trans slurs to explain his vote. I mean, right there, that just shows how weird this guy really is.
Yeah, I think that the anti-trans language that was used was actually Runstead's excuse for abstaining.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I don't want to mess that up then. All right. Oh, well, there's another winner there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if I didn't already have the signs for state rep, I might have ran for Senate. However, I have the signs. I'm being fiscally conservative. I'm going to use the signs I have.
Right. Understand. And this was just something I was going through some of my notes when it came to Matt Maddock because I've talked a lot about him. And I don't know why this feels like it was 5 years ago, but it was just a few months ago when he did sent out that embarrassing tweet about how there are these planes at Metro Airport. And look, they're bringing in all kinds of illegal immigrants to Detroit. Everybody be scared, when it was, in fact, the Gonzaga men's basketball team, which was arriving for the NCAA tournament in Detroit that day. But I mean, again, it was just another example of his blatant racism. I'm sorry. That's exactly what it was. And he put that in full view for everyone.
And he left it up. He just left it up even after he was fact checked. It's insanity. I don't know how anybody takes this man seriously. I don't know about you, but when I make a statement that I'm saying is a fact, I research it before I do it. I don't like being wrong, especially publicly wrong. And he just thrives off of stoking fear and hate and anger. I can't imagine living like that. And I don't want my community to keep living like this.
That is a great way of putting it right there, too. And it's just how MAGA Republicanism is, and he feeds into that. He is facing a primary challenge, but so are you. And her name is Debbie Llewellyn. However, I think there's a catch to your primary race because according to Bridge, Michigan, Miss Llewellyn and her husband, Tom, they've given money to many conservative causes and campaigns. And this just seems to be a phenomenon, Sarah, that's happening in some other districts across the state where conservatives have seen the light suddenly and are running as Democrats in the primaries. So what's going on there, Sarah? And have you had a chance to meet up with this Debbie Llewellyn at all during this campaign?
No, I got to get coffee with Maddock's primary challenger.
Okay.
That was nice. But I have not met Debbie Llewellyn. I think I've seen one picture of her, which is her Facebook profile picture because she has it locked down. There's no website. There's zero information about her except for what we can find is that her and her husband have both donated. I believe that her husband is a Michigan GOP national delegate. Before he edited his LinkedIn profile, he had something to do with the 11th District Republicans. Both of their Facebook profiles, their friends are Patrick Kolbick.
Oh, the former right-wing state senator and the guy who ran for governor back in 2018 and lost. Okay, go on.
Ronnie McDaniel, whatever she's going by now.
Yeah.
Matt Maddock, Michon Maddock. Those are their friends. They obviously don't know how to private their friends on Facebook. I don't understand. I think that the Republicans are a little bit worried this year, especially the extremist ones, because they're watching the trend nationally. I mean, maybe they should have paid attention to that in 2022, but also the Michigan Republican Party is broke. So what's the best way to try to siphon money away from your general election opponent is to run a primary opponent to them, make them spend more money before they can get to the actual general. So I think that might be one of their tactics, but he's obviously worried. So that's nice.
Right. I think that's exactly what's happening. They are afraid of how much your resume and your message is going to resonate with so many people there in your district. One final question. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. we have to at least bring this up because, of course, it was breaking news earlier this week. President Biden announcing his decision to step aside in this election and endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee. First, Sarah, if I could just get your reaction to Biden's announcement, and then maybe you can talk about how him stepping aside, how that will now affect down ballot races, especially your own here on the Democratic side.
So when I got the alert on my phone, that was before he had announced who he was endorsing. I'm not going to lie, I had a little bit of a panic attack. I went to my backyard, sat under a tree, and had my little panic attack. Immediately, my first response was, it better be Harris. He had better endorse Harris, because if not, there's, all of the complications with ballots and access to the fundraising and the infrastructure that's already set up. So there's all of those issues. And there's also the issue of Black women have saved our butts over and over again. And this entire time they've been saying, if it is not Biden, it has to be Harris. And I'm listening to them. I'm hopeful that it will turn out some voters that felt like they couldn't vote for Biden, or that they felt like the Democratic Party wasn't listening when they were calling for a younger candidate. Don't get me wrong. Biden was never my first choice. However, and this was even in 2020. However, once he was the nominee, I am willing to do anything to keep Trump out of office.
Right.
My family was in a Biden ad, a special buy Biden ad, because I am willing to do anything to protect my community, my daughter, from Trump's insane policies. So I was in this special buy ad and I had threats, and I'm willing to do it all over again. I would vote for the dog poop in my backyard that I have to clean up every day before I ever voted for Trump.
That's a good bumper sticker right there. I like that one. That's pretty good. And I'll just say this as just to finish it off here. I think there was a lot of tension and I think sometimes some animosity on our side with each other when it came to President Biden stepping down or staying and all that. But since he's made his decision to indeed step down, I think that's freed up some of that tension here already. And we're already seeing that. And I think that you're seeing like this jolt of energy now kind of return back to our side. So I hope it does really help everybody down ballot, especially here in Michigan, because we need to keep the state house blue. And that's why we need people like you fighting for your district. And if there's somebody who'd like to help out or volunteer for your campaign, Sarah, how can they do so?
They can sign up at sarahmayseward.com. There's just a little button to click. You can volunteer, get yard signs, donate. Also, you can just reach out. My number is public. Reach out, say hi. We can talk.
And as everybody just heard here during the last few minutes, you are a great person to talk with. Sarah May-Seward, Democratic candidate for the 51st State House District. Thanks so much for being a guest, and good luck to you in the future. We'll be keeping an eye on your race, because if you can defeat Matt Maddock or his primary challenger, whoever, I do think that it'll signal just how good of an election night it really is for Democrats here in Michigan. So good luck to you. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you. I cannot wait.
leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. Subscribe to the podcast, and also subscribe to Left of Lansing on YouTube. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, the Gram, and Facebook. Take the battle to them.